Hey, imagine you're reading the Bible and suddenly notice two very different portrayals of God. On one hand, there's the loving, merciful God who forgives sins, offers humanity hope, and promises salvation. But on the other hand, there's a God full of wrath, ordering wars, destruction, and harsh punishments. It feels like you're reading about two completely different beings, right? Well, maybe that's because you are. The idea of God's duality in the Bible is one of the most overlooked and debated topics in history. For over 2,000 years, people have been taught that Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, is the same as the God of love, preached by Jesus. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the God worshipped in ancient Israel wasn't one unified force, but two completely different entities that were eventually merged into one? Let's take a closer look at Yahweh, the God we encounter throughout the Old Testament. He's a deity who wiped out civilizations, sent plagues, ordered executions, and reduced entire cities to ashes. This isn't the loving, forgiving father figure from Sunday school. Yahweh was a God of fear and control, someone you worshipped, not out of love, but out of sheer terror. If you didn't follow Yahweh's rules, you faced complete annihilation. Now here's the twist. The New Testament God doesn't seem like Yahweh at all. Jesus speaks of a God of love, forgiveness, and turning the other cheek. A totally different message. Early Christians noticed this contradiction too. In fact, some ancient religious groups, like the Gnostics, believed that Yahweh wasn't even the true God. They thought he was a flawed, lesser being, a pretender to the throne. Gnostic texts like the Gospel of Thomas or the Secret Book of John describe Yahweh as an imperfect being, a sort of false god who created the material world to trap souls in physical form. To them, the true God was far beyond Yahweh, hidden, unknowable, and filled with light and love. Humanity's mission, according to them, was to break free from Yahweh's control and discover higher truths. So why isn't this side of the story well known? Because over time, the Church merged these two gods, Yahweh, the God of judgment, and the loving God of the New Testament, into one figure. They did this to control people's beliefs and maintain their power. Anyone who questioned this narrative was branded a heretic and silenced. Next time you hear Yahweh described as both loving and wrathful, ask yourself, how can the same God who commands love also command genocide? Could it be that the truth about who God is has been hidden from us, simplified into a story that serves a certain purpose? If Yahweh was just one God among many in the ancient world, what does that mean for monotheism? And here's another thing to think about. Why were certain books chosen to be part of the Bible, while others were left out or labeled as heretical? The answer isn't divine intervention, it's politics. It all goes back to the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, where the Roman Emperor Constantine needed to unify his empire. He realized that if he could standardize Christianity, he could bring people together. So he gathered bishops and church leaders and made political decisions about which version of Christianity would be the official one. It wasn't about spirituality. It was about power, control, and shaping history to fit a certain narrative. Constantine and the Council of Nicaea, power over truth. Constantine wasn't interested in theology, he was interested in power. The Council of Nicaea wasn't about uncovering God's true word. It was about crafting a narrative that would strengthen the Roman Empire. Let's take a look behind the scenes at what really went down during this council. The most powerful bishops gathered with a mission to decide which texts would be included in the Bible and which would be left out. That's right. There were many more Gospels and writings about Jesus floating around than what you find in the New Testament today. Ever heard of the Gospel of Thomas? It's a mind-blowing text that portrays Jesus as a mystical teacher, urging people to seek knowledge and enlightenment for themselves. But guess what? It didn't make the cut. Neither did the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which showed her as one of Jesus' most important disciples. Why were these books excluded? Simple. They didn't fit the version of Christianity that Constantine wanted. He needed a narrative where Jesus was both divine and human, where church leaders had authority, and where questioning the official story wasn't allowed. The Council of Nicaea laid the foundation for what we now call Orthodox Christianity. But this orthodoxy wasn't about seeking truth. It was about maintaining control. Certain ideas were seen as too dangerous, too liberating. So, the Church cherry-picked the texts that aligned with their agenda, and anything else was branded as heresy. The Council didn't just decide which books to include. They also came up with doctrines like the Nicene Creed, which outlined what Christians were supposed to believe, including the concept of the Trinity. Before this council, not all Christians even believed in the Trinity. But after Nicaea, it became official doctrine, and if you didn't accept it, you were labeled a heretic. What happened to the other texts and beliefs that didn't fit the official story? They were hunted down and destroyed. Groups like the Gnostics went into hiding to protect their sacred writings, while others, like the Cathars, were wiped out entirely by the Church, all in the name of truth. But it wasn't truth. It was a narrative controlled by those in power. The Bible, as we know it today, was molded and edited to fit a specific version of events, one that served the interests of the powerful. For 2,000 years, that version has been presented as the only truth. But what if the real story of Jesus, and the real story of God, lies hidden in the texts that were rejected, buried, or destroyed? Here's where it gets even more interesting. Some of these lost texts have started to resurface. In the 1940s, a collection of ancient scrolls known as the Nag Hammadi Library was discovered in Egypt. These texts, including the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Philip, offer a radically different perspective on Jesus, God, and the nature of existence, one that was deliberately suppressed by the Council of Nicaea. So when people tell you that the Bible is the infallible Word of God, you have to ask, which version of God's Word are they talking about? The one Constantine and his bishops carefully curated to fit their agenda, or the full, unfiltered truth that's been kept out of reach for millennia? Now, imagine everything you've been taught about the God of the Bible. What if I told you that some ancient groups didn't believe this God was the ultimate creator at all? What if they believed that this God was actually flawed, even malevolent, and that humanity has been trapped in a false reality all along? It sounds wild, but this is exactly what the Gnostics believed. The Gnostics were an early Christian group with a totally different take on the Bible's God. While mainstream Christianity taught that Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, was the one true creator, the Gnostics disagreed. They believed that Yahweh wasn't the supreme God at all. Instead, they saw him as a lower, flawed being known as the Demiurge, who created the material world and trapped humanity within it. In Gnostic belief, the true, supreme God, who was all good and all light, existed far beyond the Demiurge, beyond the physical world we live in. According to the Gnostics, this material world, with all its pain, suffering, and corruption, was the work of the Demiurge, not the true God. To them, the Demiurge was more like a jailer, and the material world was a prison for our souls. Think about that for a moment. The God billions of people worship might not be the ultimate God after all, according to Gnostic teachings. Instead, we may be living in a false reality, created by a lower, corrupt being. And the worst part, this Demiurge has tricked humanity into worshipping him as the true God. Why has God kept us in the dark? The Gnostic answer. Have you ever wondered why we're blind to the true divine source beyond the material world? The Gnostics had a fascinating explanation for this. According to their beliefs, the Demiurge, a flawed and false god, came into being through Sophia, a divine figure representing wisdom. Sophia tried to create something on her own, without the permission of the true God, and accidentally gave birth to the demiurge. Embarrassed by her creation, Sophia cast him into the material world. Unaware that he was a lesser being, the demiurge believed himself to be the one true God and demanded worship from humanity. For the Gnostics, this wasn't just a wild story, it was a metaphor for our reality. They believed our souls come from the true God, but we're trapped in this flawed material world created by the demiurge. The ultimate goal of life, according to them, is to break free from this illusion and reconnect with the real divine source beyond. But the demiurge doesn't want us to find that truth. He wants to keep us trapped in ignorance, using systems like organized religion to keep people worshipping him instead of seeking the true God. This flips the whole biblical narrative upside down. The Gnostics weren't just criticizing Yahweh, they believed that the entire material world was a mistake, created by a being who thought he was God, but wasn't. And here's the twist. According to Gnostic texts, Jesus didn't come to die for our sins. Instead, he came to wake us up from this illusion. In their view, Jesus is more of a spiritual teacher, showing humanity the way out of the demiurge's prison and back to the true divine realm. Take the Gospel of Judas, for example, a Gnostic text discovered in the 1970s. In this Gospel, Jesus laughs at his disciples because they're worshipping the wrong God. He tells Judas that he's the only one who understands, because Judas will help him escape the material world. This is a completely different Jesus than the one we hear about in church. And it's not just fringe belief. Gnosticism was a major movement in early Christianity. Entire communities of Christians believed in this alternative version of faith. But when the Council of Nicaea declared these ideas heretical, the Church destroyed Gnostic texts and persecuted those who followed these beliefs. The Church couldn't let the idea of a false god spread because it would undermine their authority. If the God they preached wasn't the true God, their entire power structure would crumble. So, here's the big question. What if the Gnostics were right? What if humanity has been worshipping the wrong God for thousands of years? And what if the real God is still out there, waiting for us to wake up and see through the illusion? It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but these were real beliefs held by real people who were silenced because their ideas were too dangerous. And here's the mind-blowing part. After centuries of suppression, we're only now starting to rediscover these lost texts. But hold on, things are about to get even darker. What happens when people start asking questions and challenging the official story? The Church didn't respond with debates. They used fire, steel, and terror. Let's dive into one of the bloodiest chapters in religious history. The Inquisition, the Crusades, and the witch hunts. These weren't just battles for control. They were violent efforts to erase any ideas that didn't fit the Church's narrative. For over 2,000 years, the Church has done more than preach the gospel. It's hunted down and destroyed entire communities and belief systems that dared to oppose it. Take the Cathars, a peaceful Christian sect in the 12th century southern France. Their beliefs were closer to Gnosticism. They believed the material world was created by a lesser God and rejected the Old Testament deity. They lived simple, non-violent lives, but their beliefs threatened the Catholic Church. So, in 1209, Pope Innocent III declared war on them. In the aftermath of one of Europe's bloodiest crusades, known as the Albigensian Crusade, Catholic armies marched into Cathar territory, massacring men, women, and children by the tens of thousands. Entire cities were wiped out, all in the name of defending the true faith. But why? Because the Cathars posed a threat to the Church's control over what people believed and how they lived. And that's just one example. The Church's Inquisition was another brutal tool used to crush any opposition to its teachings. If you lived in Europe during the Middle Ages and dared to question the official narrative about God, You could be dragged before inquisitors, tortured into confessing, and then burned alive for heresy. Thousands of ordinary people were executed, their lives destroyed, just for believing something different. The Inquisition didn't stop at non-Christians or obscure sects like the Cathars. It targeted anyone who dared to question church authority, even from within. Scholars, mystics, and priests were branded heretics if they strayed too far from official teachings. Remember Giordano Bruno? He was a brilliant philosopher who proposed that the universe might be infinite and that other planets could harbour life. For these ideas, he was burned at the stake in 1600. And let's not forget the witch hunts. For centuries, the Church fueled mass hysteria by convincing people that women, especially those who didn't conform to societal norms, were in league with the devil. Tens of thousands of women were tortured and killed in Europe and the American colonies, accused of witchcraft. Midwives, herbalists, or simply women who lived alone were branded as witches and publicly executed. Why? To maintain control, to ensure no one strayed from the Church's rigid social and religious order. The Church wasn't defending truth, it was defending power, and that power was fragile. For centuries, the Church feared losing its grip on the masses. Anytime someone presented alternative beliefs or asked too many questions, the Church didn't respond with debate. It responded with swords, fire, and torture. Now think about this. Why would any institution resort to such brutality if it truly believed it held the one absolute truth? Why silence people instead of engaging in open dialogue? The truth is, the Church's authority wasn't grounded in divine truth, but in fear. Fear of rebellion, fear of losing control, fear of alternative ideas. And the ripple effects of this suppression are still felt today. The Church's violent history in response to alternative beliefs has created a culture where questioning religious authority is seen as dangerous, and many still fear stepping outside the lines drawn for them. But here's something worth pondering. All these ideas that were suppressed, whether it was the Cathars, the Gnostics, or the so-called heretics, were part of a larger battle for spiritual freedom. Consider the story of Lucifer. The fallen angel, we've been told, is the ultimate villain. But what if we've been interpreting this story all wrong? Lucifer's name literally means light bringer or morning star. That's a clue that this tale might not be as black and white as we've been told. Why would the embodiment of evil be named the bringer of light? Does that sound like someone leading us into darkness? Or could Lucifer have been bringing a different kind of light, knowledge, awakening? Look at the story of the Garden of Eden. Traditionally, the serpent, often associated with Lucifer, tempted Adam and Eve into disobeying God, causing their downfall. But what was the serpent actually offering? Knowledge. The fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Before they ate it, Adam and Eve lived in ignorance, unaware of their potential. After eating it, their eyes were opened. They gained understanding, awareness, and the ability to shape their own destiny. Was that truly a bad thing? Or was it the very growth humanity needed to evolve and understand the world around them? The idea of a light-bringer or a Prometheus figure often symbolizes a positive force. Think about Prometheus in Greek mythology. He defied the gods, stole fire, and gave it to humanity. Yes, he was punished, but in our eyes, he became a hero, a symbol of rebellion against oppression. Could Lucifer be seen in a similar light? Let's break it down. In the story of the fall, God establishes the rules and expects obedience, while Lucifer questions authority. He challenges the notion that blind obedience is the only way to live. He's the one saying, there's more to life than just following orders. There's knowledge, wisdom, and freedom. In this view, Lucifer's rebellion isn't about evil. It's about challenging control and helping humanity break free from ignorance. It goes even deeper. In some Gnostic traditions, Lucifer isn't viewed as evil at all. He's seen as a liberator who tried to free humanity from the control of the demiurge, a flawed, false god who created the material world. In these stories, the demiurge is the true villain, not Lucifer. The Gnostics believed that Lucifer was awakening humanity to a greater spiritual truth beyond the physical world. The traditional church narrative teaches that obedience to God is the ultimate good, and rebellion is the ultimate sin. But what if the story is more nuanced? What if rebellion isn't inherently bad? What if seeking knowledge, questioning authority, and choosing freedom over obedience are actually what make us human? In this light, Lucifer's so-called fall wasn't a fall at all. It was a breakthrough. This shift in perspective changes the way we think about morality. For centuries, the Church has portrayed Lucifer's rebellion as the ultimate sin. But if we start to see him as the bringer of light, the one who helped humanity step into its own power, everything changes. Is obedience truly the highest virtue, or is it the courage to seek truth, even if that means defying authority, that makes us truly free? Consider this. In a world where questioning authority is seen as dangerous, where we're told to follow the rules without asking too many questions, Lucifer's story takes on a radical new meaning. He becomes not just the villain of the Bible, but a symbol of intellectual and spiritual freedom. Perhaps that's why the Church has worked so hard for 2,000 years to paint him as the ultimate villain, because a figure who represents rebellion, knowledge, and freedom threatens any system of control. And here's the real twist. If we reconsider Lucifer's role, the entire framework of good and evil starts to unravel. It's no longer just about obedience versus rebellion. It's about what those concepts truly mean. Maybe real evil isn't in questioning authority, but in blindly following it. Maybe the true sin isn't rebellion, but submission to a system that keeps us in the dark. Ever wonder why the Bible we have today is so selective? Out of all the ancient texts, why do we only have 66 or 73 books depending on your tradition? The truth is, there were many more texts out there, books that were deliberately left out, suppressed or labeled as heresy. These are the Apocrypha and Pseudepigrapha, and they completely shift our understanding of God, humanity, and the cosmos. Take the Book of Enoch, for example. It contains stories barely hinted at in the Bible, like the tale of the Watchers, angels who descended to earth, mated with human women, and gave birth to giant offspring known as the Nephilim. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but this was a common belief in early Jewish and Christian traditions. So why isn't it part of the Bible you know today? Because the Church found it too controversial, too strange, and too difficult to explain. The Book of Enoch threatened the carefully crafted narrative of a divine presence kept cleanly separate from the messy human world. Maybe it's time to rethink the stories we've been told. Enoch's story was once widely accepted. Early church figures like Tertullian and Justin Martyr considered it crucial to understanding the fall of angels and the origins of evil. Even Jude, a book in the New Testament, quotes directly from Enoch. So, why did the Church eventually bury this text? Because it portrays a chaotic and complex cosmic battle, one that challenges the simpler narrative of God versus Satan that we're used to hearing. Then there's the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which throws a major wrench into traditional views on women in early Christianity. In this text, Mary is depicted as one of Jesus' closest disciples, possessing spiritual insight that even surpasses Peter, one of the top male apostles. There's a moment where Peter actually challenges her authority, because he can't accept the idea of a woman being so spiritually advanced. This gospel reveals women as key players in early Christianity, but the Church couldn't accept a narrative where women held power or divine knowledge. So, it was labelled heretical and buried for centuries. These texts aren't just historical footnotes. They're revolutionary. They challenge the very foundation of what we've been taught about God, Jesus, and how the universe works. Take the Gospel of Thomas, for example. It's not a story-driven narrative like the traditional Gospels. It's a collection of Jesus' sayings that emphasize self-knowledge and spiritual awakening. Phrases like, "The kingdom of God is inside you and outside you," focus less on sin and more on personal transformation. That's a massive shift from the Christian doctrine of original sin and the need for external salvation. And that's precisely why it didn't make it into the Bible. But why did the church suppress these texts instead of including them and letting people decide for themselves? Because they offered a decentralized view of spirituality, one where individuals, not institutions, had the power to understand God and the universe. If people could find God within themselves and didn't need the church to mediate their connection to the divine, the church would lose its authority. So these books were hidden, suppressed, or even destroyed, not because they were false, but because they empowered people in a way that threatened the church. Entire libraries of knowledge were lost, hidden, or burned. The Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in 1945, contained dozens of Gnostic texts, some completely unknown for nearly 2,000 years. The Dead Sea Scrolls unearthed even more apocalyptic and mystical writings, challenging the narrative we've been fed. These texts reveal a more diverse spiritual landscape, one where there wasn't just one way to understand God or the universe, but many. The big question is, what else is still out there? What other truths or texts were lost in the fires of the Inquisition or buried in time, waiting to be discovered? And more importantly, why were so many of these texts, which offer radically different spiritual perspectives, suppressed? The answer is simple: control. By controlling the narrative, the church controlled the people. It wasn't just about guiding people to salvation, it was about defining the terms of that salvation. Anyone who posed a threat to that control, whether Gnostics, early mystics, or freethinkers, had to be silenced. These forgotten books were a threat to the church's monopoly on spiritual truth. So after everything we've uncovered, who or what is God really? The image of God passed down for millennia might not be the full picture. It might just be a small piece of a much larger, more complex puzzle. And it's time we start thinking beyond the stories we've been told for over 2,000 years. Mainstream religion has handed us a clear-cut image of God, an all-powerful ruler who rewards the faithful and punishes sinners. But what if that's only one version of the divine? What if God is much bigger, much more mysterious than any single tradition or text can explain? Ancient cultures all around the world, Sumerians, Egyptians, Greeks, Hindus, had their own visions of the divine. What if, instead of just one story, there are many ways to understand the mysteries of the universe? It's time to explore these ancient, hidden truths and challenge the narratives we've been taught to believe. In ancient civilizations, gods weren't seen as distant, singular beings. Instead, they were viewed as forces of nature, embodiments of the universe, or even multiple deities working together to maintain balance. These people didn't fixate on one ruling god. They found divinity in everything: the stars, the earth, and the energy within each of us. It raises the question: has the modern image of God limited our understanding of the divine? What if God isn't a distant figure, judging from above, but a force that exists within us, a power we can tap into, a light that guides us, a consciousness that connects everything? This isn't just a concept from New Age spirituality. It's rooted in ancient wisdom and even some early Christian teachings that were suppressed over time. Think of the Gnostics. They believed each person carried a divine spark, a piece of the true God waiting to be awakened. And that spark couldn't be controlled by priests or the church. It was something you had to find within yourself. That's a threatening idea for anyone who seeks to control people's beliefs. If you can find God within, you don't need an institution to tell you how to connect with the divine. and that shakes the very foundation of those systems of control. What if God isn't just a force within us, but something far beyond human comprehension? We've been told God has human-like qualities, love, anger, jealousy, but maybe God is so vast, so unknowable, that we can't truly grasp it. Perhaps the divine doesn't concern itself with our day-to-day lives in the way we've been taught. What if the real divine is an energy that flows through everything, the universe, the stars, the earth, and yes, even through us? This isn't about rejecting religion or the idea of God, but about expanding our understanding. It's about moving beyond the narrow definitions we've created, realizing the divine can be found not just in churches or scriptures, but in nature, the cosmos, the connections between us, and in the mysteries we've yet to uncover. It's bigger than any one tradition, text, or interpretation. So where do we go from here? That's for us to decide. After thousands of years of being told what to believe, maybe it's time to ask the big questions again. Time to challenge the narratives that have been imposed on us. To seek the divine in ways that resonate with our personal experiences of the world. The truth about God may not be in a single book or doctrine. It may be something we have to discover for ourselves, through exploration, reflection, and connecting with the world around us. Thank you for joining us on this journey of questioning, seeking, and expanding our understanding of the divine. If this resonated with you, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and may we all find the truth, wherever it may be hiding. God bless us all.